All right, let's get into audience questions for the week. Of course, you can send them in however you want: email, voicemail, Twitter, Reddit, whatever you want. Today's first question is via voicemail. The voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P.
Hey, David, I wanted to ask you about the Laffer Curve. I hear a lot of people on the left often lampoon the idea of the Laffer Curve because it seems to be associated with Reaganomics. And the extent to which that it is, I can understand this kind of criticism, but I just want to hear from you in theory why the idea is not sound, because my understanding of it is that at a 0% tax rate, the government will take in $0 in revenue, obviously. At a 100% tax rate, the government will take in 0% revenue because it will completely destroy any kind of productivity. So to my mind, the Laffer curve says, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's just a number somewhere in between 0 and 100 that's optimal. Obviously, people on the right will tend to say that that's a lower number and use this idea as a justification to reduce tax rates. But I don't understand why, in theory, liberals could very easily apply the Laffer curve too and say the ideal tax rate is actually higher. So I don't understand why the Laffer curve is kind of always associated with the political right in this country, when it seems to me that it's sort of a neutral thing that either side could use, and it seems like sort of a common sense idea. So I'd like to hear your take on this. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So listen, the right uses the Laffer curve because they like to come up with just really simple ways of doing politics. Like they've been really successful by saying, hey, taxes are bad because it's your money. You've earned it and you should get to keep it. So taxes should be really low. Or abortion is bad because you're killing a kid. That's it. And they really like these simple ideas. So the Laffer curve has been used almost exclusively by the right to justify cutting taxes. You're right. It could hypothetically be used by the left, but it's not, because the left tends to take a more nuanced view on this, and I'll explain what I mean. So yes, the Laffer curve is the idea that given some tax rate between 0% and 100%, there is some optimal number. But more importantly, and this is where the right tends to use it, they often like to argue that a reduction in the tax rate can lead to an increase in government revenue. That basically the idea would be, if you sometimes lower the tax rate, typically that's what the right wants to do, you will generate more total revenue by more people working because the tax rate on their income is lower, and because there will be more money floating around for economic growth. Here are the problems with the Laffer curve. Number one, it's usually used to justify a reduction in taxes when actually an increase in taxes would be better for the economy. So the Laffer curve is constantly misused by the right. But the most important thing is that the tax rate that the Laffer curve is referring to is like an overall rate or an average rate of some kind. And as we know, we have a progressive tax system. So the impact that a change in the tax rate is going to have on government revenue is going to be very different based on who is getting the tax increase or the tax decrease. You could have a decrease or an increase to the average tax rate in a way that would be stimulative to the economy or not. If you decrease taxes by reducing the tax rate only on the richest Americans, your economic benefit is going to be far smaller than if you lower the average tax rate by giving money back to middle class Americans, because middle class Americans need the extra money for their daily lives, whereas the very rich are just going to save that money, which is not very economically stimulative. So that's why the right Pat likes to oversimplify a lot of issues. And they say, hey, the Laffer curve tells us you lower taxes, revenue goes up. The average tax rate that the Laffer curve deals with does not actually tell us anything about what would happen to the economy. Which tax bracket are you talking about?
Yeah, this is what Republicans are trying to argue now, right, with their tax plan.
Yes.
That, even though revenues will go down, we'll make up for it because there'll be so much more economic productivity.
Indeed.
But then you have independent agencies analyzing it, and they predict maybe a tenth of the economic output that Republicans are predicting.
That's exactly right. And you could have, this is not, what people I think don't understand is, we're not making an argument for or against raising or lowering taxes on any particular tax bracket in this segment. What I'm telling you is that the Laffer curve is effectively useless if we're talking about the average tax rate, because we have a progressive tax system in the US with brackets, and it's almost always misused by the right just to justify lowering taxes all the time, which is exactly what they want to do. So yes, Laffer curve, it's interesting. It's not particularly useful to us in thinking about what it is we need to do with tax policy.
Yeah, I love it. 0 to 100%, somewhere in the middle of there, but it tells us nothing about where the top of that parabola is. Like, where does it max out?
And not to mention what the brackets should be and at what income limits you go from being in one bracket to the other, which are really the most important thing. So it's interesting to know about the Laffer curve. I don't know how much it's going to teach you about what taxes should be.